honeybee or one wasp or more decided that they were not going to eat meat anymore and there was going to be vegetarians. So they started collecting pollen for their protein rather than collecting insects and things like that as wasps do. And so from that grew a number of bees. And you might want to guess how many bees there are in the world. There are 20,000 species of bees, and we're not talking about honeybees yet, okay? And for the most part, they're all vegetarian, okay? They live off the pollen of plants rather than on insects and meat eaters. They eat pollen as their protein source. And as we get into talking about bees, and as you get your bees, you're going to see a lot of pollen coming into the hive. And then you need to know why they bring in the pollen. Can't they just live on honey? Pollen is their protein source. Bees cannot reproduce, they cannot raise young, if you will, in the hive without pollen. They can't do it with honey because honey does not have enough protein in it for them to grow their little bodies, okay? And I said something, there about 20,000 species of bees, and you'll see a lot of bees around you. We have about, I think it's about 4,000 species of bees in America. Now, there are many kinds of bees. You'll see some that even look like a honeybee, but they are solitary bees. Most all bees are solitary bees. There are about 7 different species, species of honeybees. And all of them except our bee that we imported from Europe, the honeybee that we use, all of the others are in Asia. So it's speculated that the bees originated in Asia, and then the European honeybee moved out of Asia into Europe and to Africa, and they're the bees that we imported to America about during the 1600s or so to America. So, and several others since then. So, most of the honeybees that I mentioned, I said there are probably about 7 species of honeybees. All but 2 of them make their comb in the open. In other words, on a branch of a tree or in a brush or something like that. There's one that's real small, and it usually goes into bushes and builds nests in bushes and so. But they all build comb, okay? A comb out of wax. You're gonna hear bees blamed for a lot of things as you keep bees. You know, bees stung me, a wasp is not a bee, okay? A yellow jacket's not a bee. A hornet's not a bee, okay? They're a different group altogether. They're a different kingdom. They're in a different area. They're not vegetarian, and their sting is different, if you will, because their sting is designed to kill, okay? Honeybees, their sting is designed to get you out of the way. So that's what they're working on. Okay. There's two species of bees, Apis cerana and Apis mellifera. Mellifera is the western honeybee, the one that we have. It and the Apis cerana is still in Asia, but those 2 species of bees are distinct in that they build their nest in cavities, and that distinguishes them from the ones that are nest in the open on tree limbs and so forth. As you begin keeping bees, you're gonna get an eye opener I mean, you're gonna start being more aware of nature. You're gonna start wondering what is that pollen that's coming in? It's bright red, or it's a bright yellow, or maybe it's a dull color. And you're gonna start wondering, what is that? And you're gonna be looking for the trees around. So it's really not only, it's an interesting study in nature. And you might wonder, why my title of my talk, I think it's, I didn't see the schedule or your program this morning, but I think it's honeybee biology. Why is it not just honeybee zoology? The reason is this. Actually, can you imagine a world without pretty flowers? No perfume in the bloom of a plant. You can't smell them. There's nothing to attract you to them. Well, there is a love affair going on between the honeybee and plants and flowers. And it's because of the honeybee or pollinators, if you will, the bees primarily, on plants. The plants have developed these beautiful flowers to attract them. Not only that, there are things there that you and I don't even see, like the bees see in ultraviolet light, and there's colors there that attract honeybees that don't attract us. We don't see. So there is this affair between plants and insects, if you will, in this case honeybees. So I think you ought to know a little bit about flowers too, and why does the bee go to the flower, and what does the bee get from the flower? It's pretty obvious that they come in, but when they come in with pollen on their legs, you can see that. And when we get into the anatomy of the honeybee here in a minute, we'll look at that. But before I do that, I think I'll go over to the flower itself. And it says, if you come, we will provide you what you need. And for that, you're going to provide pollination for us. You're going to go from one flower to another plant on another flower, and you're going to cross-pollinate and cause the process of reproduction in the plant. And I don't know how much of that flower you can see. I tried to get one that's very basic, and after if you got any questions about it, I'll tell you. But basically, the flower has an ovary, if you will, and that sits right down on the bottom, and each one inside of that, where the seeds, what amounts to where the seed is formed, is called an ovule. And somehow the pollen needs to get from another flower, from the back of the honeybee, or off the legs of the honeybee, from one flower to the other. And that nature has provided a stigma on top of a stamen, if you will, or a filament, if you will. And that is where the pollen grains are kept. They're on the top of that, and they're near the stigma, which is on the head of the, above the ovary, if you will. And when the pollen grains hit the ovary, they grow down into the ovule and fertilize it. So that's what's taking place. That is plant sex, if you will. And I think it's interesting to know that. And another thought before I leave that is that you wonder, where does the nectar come from? You can see where the pollen comes from, but where does the nectar come from? That's the sweet substance that the bees gather from the flower. Okay? In this case, nature allowed itself some options in different locations. If you ever look at a tulip poplar bloom, and they'll be blooming around the 1st of May, as you approach toward the 1st of May, you'll see at the base of the leaves, you'll see likely to see a droplet of nectar, sticky substance. What will become honey when the bee brings it into the nest. And and that's at the base of the leaf, and it's secreted through a gland on the base of the leaf, okay? But as I said, nature, in the case of the flowers, they put the nectaries, as we call them, the glands that secrete the nectar, may be anywhere there at the discretion of different species of plants. In other words, sometimes it's on the ovary itself, sometimes it's even on the stamen sometimes. The stem that holds the pollen, if you will. But it's strategically placed by the plant in order to get the fertilization to take place. So that's a little lesson on the flower, and it may be not what you came here for. You want to learn about bees, but you'll be learning about that too. And it is a fascination study. It's not noted for giving off a lot of odor, but there's that mild, very wonderful odor that comes off the flowers. And that is not for you to attract you or me. That's specifically there for the bee, the pollinator, is to attract that. And bees have the ability to detect odor. They can detect odor. They got eyes. They can find the flowers. And not only that, but they can go back to the hive and tell the others where it is. And that's sort of an advanced study that I'm not going to get into today, I think, because I have a limited amount of time, and you have a limited amount of patience to listen to me, I guess. But anyway, they do have the ability to communicate and tell the other bees in the hive where things are. And they do that with a very small bee. It's amazing. There's two kinds of intelligence in the hive. There's the individual bee intelligence, and there's the intelligence of the group. And all this is the fascination of honeybees. And some people refer to a hive as a superorganization, and they don't really reproduce until they form a swarm. Okay, I'm going to point out some structures on the honeybee. Of course, when I'm looking at this honeybee, you can see a couple of things about it. You can see the body's hairy, and that collects a lot of the pollen. The pollen is collected on the hairs of the body, and then they have the pollen comb. They can comb it off and put it in their basket. And here's a picture of probably can't see it down here, but this is a picture of the pollen basket where they comb the honey off their hairs of their body and put it in here, and that's what you see on their legs when they come flying in the hive. And it's amazing how much they can stuff in there. And you stop to think about pollen grains are microscopic, okay? They don't look microscopic when they bring it in, does it? They come in with a wad, and they stick it together with a bit of nectar so it stays in place. Okay, so that, you notice the hairiness. And then you see that they have two wings, right? Do they have two wings?
6.
And then where are they attached?
Thorax.
They're attached to the thorax, and they actually have 4 wings. I mean, 2 on each side. Okay? And they are, I was privileged once to see the structure of the wings and how they're attached microscopically, and it's truly amazing. There are little hooks and little holes that the hooks go into. It's truly amazing what happens when those wings are joined. So it becomes, in effect, one wing when they're joined, and that's what you usually see on them. Sometimes you'll see bees with them dislodged, and you'll see them open, and you'll notice the 4 wings, but not always. Okay. That's that. And then, another important part of the bee is the head, and we'll go to that right now. The antenna, okay? The antenna, the 2 antennas, is said that these are their method of detecting odors and touch. Touch is important for the antenna as well. But they do detect odors from that. In other words, that's their nose, in effect. Down the mouth part, these on the outside, they actually have mandibles or teeth or jaws, and You know, it sounds, you know, a new beekeeper will tell you, or maybe just a lay person will say, I got bit by a bee. Well, they didn't, they got stung. But bees can actually bite, and I have had them sit on my arm and bite me. So they do have the ability to bite. So, but usually it's the sting. And then there's the proboscis that goes down and sucks up the nectar and brings it eventually into the hive. Now the nectar goes into a honey stomach, and it does not go into the digestive tract directly. It's a crop, if you will. And anything that goes past the crop is purposely for their food and energy. But the honey that goes in the crop is regurgitated when they come back in the hive. And I mentioned a while ago that you can tell when your bees come into the hive, you'll see the pollen. That's something you can see on their legs. But you also, with experience, can tell when they're loaded with nectar. And you do that by how they land. They'll come in real heavy, and rather than just zoom in the hive, they'll go like that. They'll drop in because they're so loaded that they have to have a little trouble landing. Another important part, and I mentioned the pollen basket, and then they've got to make this wax. Now, what is wax? Beeswax. It's a product that their body reorganizes the sugars into a wax rather than, it's a chemical process in the hive, in the gland of the honeybee that converts the sugars into wax, okay? It's been said that it takes something like 15 pounds of sugar of honey to make 1 pound of wax. I don't know, but I've heard various estimates of that. And underneath their abdomen, they have, this shows 8, so I guess that's what it is, 8 different wax glands. You can actually see it being secreted between the segments of the abdomen, underneath the abdomen of the honeybee, these segments, and the wax is secreted here. And they do that by a process that we call festooning, if you will. The bees gorge themselves on honey. And you might see it when you go in their hive. You'll see a cluster of bees around where they're building a comb, and they'll be hanging one on the other, and they have gorged themselves with honey, and they're secreting wax. And when they're secreting wax, you know, what color is wax? Anybody?
Clear?
Yeah. Actually, it's white. It doesn't have any color. So what happens in the process, the bees remove this wax from their abdomen, they chew it, and in the process, processing it gets mixed with pollens and things like that that add color, maybe a little propolis, but mostly pollens add color to it. And it usually becomes yellow. Sometimes, I know our sourwood honey, wax is usually very pale, and people making candles don't necessarily like it because it doesn't have that yellow tint. So it is mostly, well, the color is added after it's secreted, it's chewed, and it's amazing what they can do with it. You've seen honeycomb, and those little six-sided cells that are there, and so thin, and yet they support so much honey. Actually, this is a picture right here, and I don't know, there's no description on it, but these things are the ovaries on the side. They're rather large in the queen bee, and hardly there on the worker bee because they're not used. What is the difference between a worker and a queen? The worker, you want to tell us? Okay.
I know one thing is that the worker is much smaller than the queen.
Yeah. The worker, when the egg is laid, the queen lays 2 kinds of eggs. okay? She lays a worker egg, or a female egg, if you will, and a male egg. And a male egg is an unfertilized egg. An egg is not fertilized, okay? Female is a fertilized egg, okay? And the fertilized egg will develop into a female bee. Now you've got a fertilized egg is going to become a female bee. And what makes one a queen and others not?
Presence of royal jelly.
And it has to be the way that they're tended and fed. The queen bees are fed royal jelly, and they're nurtured to develop fully as a female. The worker bee is their sexual development is suppressed, and while the queen bee is fully expressed, and their body is fully developed. You see the shape of a honeybee. We don't have. Yeah, here. This is, I guess, is a what? No, I don't know what it is. I wish we had a picture of a queen, but yeah, I guess we do here. It'll be longer. It'll be more. She looks more like a wasp, if you will, than the question. Okay. Anyway, let's talk about what happens to the eggs when they're laid. Let's first go to the worker bee and talk about the worker bee. The queen lays an egg, and you can see an egg pictured here, in a cell, sideways, okay? And then it is there in the egg. The egg is there for 3 days. They keep it warm, if you will. Usually the nursery where the brood is being raised is about 94 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is kept nice and warm. In about 3 days, the egg hatches. And then it becomes a little larva on the fourth day. You can hardly see it. You know, people that do the grafting and work with raising bees, you can, I've heard it said if you can see it, it's too big. But it's not true, but you want to see a real small one. And so when it hatches, it's real small. And sort of there is no eggshell, I guess. It's sort of dissolved. I don't know whether anybody's ever seen an eggshell. But it is an egg, and it develops on the fourth day into a young little worm, if you will, like this. That one's getting pretty old there. And it continues to grow. It's fed. And in the worker bees, they're fed royal jelly. All are fed royal jelly at first. In fact, they're sitting on a pool of royal jelly, and they just go around in circles, eating, as they develop and grow. And they have to eat a lot because they grow fast.
What is royal jelly?
Who said that? You're not in the class, okay? Okay, so they're fed royal jelly, and it's they're floating on it, actually going around and eating. And then later on, there are the worker bee is fed some pollen and some other things. They're not fed exactly the same way, maybe not the same type of royal jelly either eventually, that the queen is fed. So they continue developing, and in 21 days from the egg, you have an adult bee coming out. And royal jelly is a secretion from the worker bee's gland in the head of the worker bee. And it's a thick, milky substance, if you will. Thick. And it is a high protein type substance. They have to eat a lot of pollen to make good healthy royal jelly. Okay, and they do that. Okay, now we're going to look at the queen bee as to how they develop. You're apt to see queen cells in your hive. There's actually about 2 or 3 different situations where you see them. One is when they're getting ready to swarm, and when they get ready to swarm, they'll have a lot of queen cells, and they'll be probably more along the lower edge of the comb than anywhere else. But you'll see maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 cells in there. I mean, they get rather, they evidently enjoy making them. So they make multiple, just lots of them, see. And so they do that, and they're hanging down there. And then the swarm comes, and one will fly away with most of the bees. And there may be other swarms happen later with some of those, but mostly the first queen that comes out, she goes around and cuts out all the other cells and kills the queens that are in there. In other words, the first one out has the edge, and she kills the others. That basically is what happens. But it's not quite that simple. And you know, we try to simplify things because we understand them better. But bees also have the ability in hives to let one out without letting the other one out, if you will. They can make a choice, and they do that sometimes. You'll see they'll hold sometimes queens in a hive in a cell for a number of days. And they may let the queen cut out most of them, and then maybe there'll be one or two they won't let them cut out, but they'll protect it from the queen. And then they don't only protect it from the queen, but they hold the queen in there. They won't let her out. They'll actually feed her through the side of the cell, but keep her in there. And then after the other queen is flown away, they may let another one out to fly away. So we tend to seem things simple, but they're not. Well, let's get to the development of the queen. The queen cell is different. It hangs down. You know, you see these are sideways. On the comb that you pull out, you'll see that where it's the same cell that they put honey in, the same cell that they put pollen in. It's the same type of cell that they raise the brood in, okay? And the queen cell is different. It hangs down. And the queen has to eat a lot. I mean, she is under pressure. Oh, she knows that the first one out is the winner. So there may be another type cell is a supersedure cell where the queen is failing. They may raise just one cell, see, or two or three. But anyway, she only has 16 days from the eggs to the mature adult queen. So she has a lot of developing to do. And not only that, while the worker bee may live a short period of time, and it depends on the situation, sometimes over winter, but mostly about 6 weeks in the summer. The queen is ready to live for several years. She's got to develop that kind of body. And so she gets the royal treatment, if you will. No, that's it. Okay. Now, there's another bee in the hive, and I don't have a picture of that one, so I'm just going to have to talk about it. The other bee in the hive is the drone bee. And strangely enough, when there's only out to be one queen per hive that's going to fly out and mate, see. But the bees like a lot of drones, and if you stop to think about it, there's the only way that a hive really reproduces is by swarming. I mean, they can raise brood, but they don't establish another colony, which is really major reproduction. So one way to reproduce, I guess, is to produce a lot of drones that mate with queens, and that's a type of reproduction as well. So the drone takes the longest to develop. The egg is laid in a larger cell. It's larger than this, not as big as this, and they take 24 days to develop. Some of them can be rather awkward looking and bulky looking, but they can fly like the mischief, okay? They really can. So I've been talking a lot of saying, I've sort of missed some points, and I don't want to miss too much, but I'm going back to the development of this very basic stuff, I guess, is the structure of the bee itself. there's three major parts, of course: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. They have a thorax like we do, but they don't have a backbone, sort of look at it like that. So they have that abdomen hangs free. They have a head, and they have on the head, they have these two major eyes on the side of the head. Now on the drone, they're much bigger, and they're probably larger because of the need to spot the females in the air. They mate in the air, okay? And in addition to these, you'll see on the top of the head of the bee, there'll be three little dots up there. Pardon?
You got it right below you,
We got it there?
on the head.
Where? Oh yeah, there you see them, yeah. Those are called ocilla or simple eyes. And while this is the compound eye here, okay? And the compound eye is not like our eyes. It has multiple little cells in it that go gather light and carry it to the brain, okay? And speaking of the brain, it's not very big in a honeybee, but it's amazing what it can do. You know, it sort of puts our ability to use ours to shame when you see what all the bee does with their small one. But anyway, that's the structure of the bee. I never quite finished it, I guess. We go to the ocilla, the eyes. We know the bee is hairy. What did I miss?
You might mention that the ocilla eyes are used for navigation from sunlight. I think they are used to track.
Well, that's. I was not going to do that, but.
Well, you ask.
And you want to do it?
No, you do it.
No, he's talking about. He's saying how they communicate in order to go tell one tells the other where to go to where the flowers are. And I think somebody over there wants to tell us.
I actually had a question. How long do the drones live? You told us the lifespan for the workers and the queens, but you didn't tell us the lifespan for the drones.
I don't know. No, seriously, I don't. I should maybe know, but I know one thing, that they're not really able to mate with a queen for about a couple of weeks after they're out, after they come out of the cell. They do some maturing and some flying after they get out. And I guess the reason I don't know is it's not really a worry, because we're concerned when we start raising queens, we're concerned about, do we have enough drones, you know, and what age are they? And we know that they have to be out and flying before they're able to mate. Well, they fly earlier, but they have to be out and sexually mature, which the maturing process continues after they're out of the cell and flying, and to produce viable sperm for the females. So anyway, that's a good question, but I just don't know exactly how long they live. But some of them appear to live over winter. I've seen them in the middle of the winter in hives, but I think that's a rare exception. Most of them, they're flying all the time. And if you go into, we call them drones, and if you go into the bee yard during the peak of the season, when there'll be a lot of drones in the air, say in the late afternoon or mid-afternoon, and you'll hear a sound, and it's a drone sound. It's a droning, and that's where they get their name, I guess. From the droning sound that they make, they sound different from the honeybee. It's more of a louder, and they're just bigger and huskier, and they make a lot of noise when they fly.
Maybe the sound is supposed to attract the queen. So the
The
queen know that they're...
They don't attract the queen. The queen goes to them. Basically, they're mating. The drones go into drone congregation areas, and there'll be just hundreds of drones flying around up there, and the queens fly into those areas usually, if she gets that far. Sometimes she mates on the way, but that's where the drones form congregation areas. And there really are a lot of drones. I mean, and you know, some people, people have even tried to trap drones. They say, we don't want these drones, they eat too much. And, you know, if we didn't have them drones, we'd have more honey. I don't think so, you know. And they seem to be very important for the morale of the hive. So, yeah, they like to produce them, and there's a lot of drones, yes.
So the queen actually leaves the hive to do the mating, they don't do that in the hive?
That's right.
Okay.
And, well, might as well finish that story. If they mate only once, about as many as 12 or 15 or even 20 times sometimes, but it's at one time in a couple of days. In other words, they mate for life, if you will. They fly, they mate with multiple drones. They may fly not one time, but 2 or 3 times, or they may just fly one time and then mate with multiple drones. They can't use all that they collect, but they just, I guess it's just their instinct to get variety, I guess. There's been a lot said about that, and I think sometimes too much about the value of multiple genes in the hive. But anyway, that's what they do. Yes?
If she lives for several years, does she fly out and mate every year?
No, never again.
Okay, so.
Never again. Never again.
So she does it here when she knows.
When she runs out of sperm, the bees get rid of her. You know, they supersede her when she cannot lay fertile eggs, or she begins to lay. She can still lay drone eggs, and when we have that condition, we call it a drone layer. She's used all the sperm, or she's become injured or something. She's not able to lay a fertile egg. And as I said earlier, the drone is from an unfertilized egg. Now, there's exceptions to that. Nothing is final. Sometimes there's a fertilized drone appears and the bees get rid of it. So that's considered a freak for them to have a fertilized drone. But anyway, that's getting beyond the class sort of thing. But anyway, did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Isn't it at the 7th day of her life she goes out for those flights? Isn't it around the 7th day of her life she goes out on those flights?
Yeah. Yeah. They were made they too, after they come out, the first thing that they do, they go through the hive making sure they don't have any competition, okay? They get acquainted in the hive and they sort of start eating and behaving like a normal bee for a while. And we call them virgin bees, virgin queens. And then after about 5 days or so, they take off and they fly and they mate. And they may fly just one time and come back and they're finished, or they may fly a couple of days. Might depend on how many drones they encounter, or maybe the weather that day, or what have you. And usually before they ever fly to mate, they'll probably make a little orientation flight outside the hive, and that'll be very short. That'll be just around the hive. So they've got, they too have to be oriented. And after they mate, they have to be able to find that little hole where they came out of and go back in. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they get lost. There are a lot of hazards out there for them. Sometimes something else can get a hold of them, and they don't make it back, or for some reason their navigation system gets off and they don't find the hole that they're supposed to go into. Yes?
So what happens then? They make another queen?
Pardon?
What happens then in the hive? They make another queen? She doesn't come
It
back?
depends. If they can, they will. If they can, they will. But when you've got what she has done already before she flew was killed all of her competition. So frequently, that's one of the reasons we wind up without a queen in the hive. She's already killed the queen. They don't have an egg or a larva young enough that they can raise another queen from. If they do, they will. And they're anyway, we do have, there are a lot of hazards and a lot of things out. And, you know, we like to think that we can set up a hive and we'll have bees in it forever. Nature doesn't plan it that way. In nature, without any interference with the diseases and the mites and all that kind of stuff, and man, they don't usually stay in the same location very long anyway, maybe 3 years or something like that. And they abandon that location. Something happens that causes them to abandon it. Maybe the queen don't make it back or something like that, and they die out. One thing that you know, we think that we want to keep everything in that hive just the way it is, and we think that there's something wrong if we don't. But in nature, it's not like that. In fact, I think sometimes a particular hive will die out to protect the species from whatever could kill them. You know, nature has designed them that way. So, okay.
Last question. You were saying that there's the two types of eggs laid. There's the male eggs and the female eggs, and it's the unfertilized egg versus the fertilized egg. I was curious, so when are the unfertilized eggs that become the dromies, when are those laid? Are they laid by the queen before she ever goes out and mates?
No, she has the ability, the queen has the ability to choose between which egg she lays.
Oh.
Yeah, pretty good, huh?
Yeah.
And how they make the decision, it's been speculated that they do it based on the size of the cell that they're laying it in, but I think that's an oversimplification. But they do have the ability to control the fertilization of the egg that they lay. There's so many things that are beyond our imagination that we try to learn, we try to understand them, but we don't really. It's really, and the amazing part is that this is just an insect, you know?
Yeah.
And yet they do so many things that are so complicated that we'll never really be able to figure it out. And I guess I've talked enough. Katie's.
Thank you, Carl.